We all have a dream, right? Something we do almost anything to make happen. But what if the price of that dream is the people you love? Today, we're going to get into the story of a musician who got everything he ever wanted, only to find out what he lost to get there. This quote, this really gets to the heart of the whole thing, doesn't it? It's that brilliant, almost blinding light of success and the shadows it casts on literally everything else. It's a huge paradox, and we're going to dig into what that really looks like. So, to really understand how it all went so wrong, we have to rewind a bit. We've got to go back to the beginning, to that moment the dream actually became real. This wasn't some overnight thing. This was years of hard work finally paying off. Okay, so for years, this music was just his, something he carried inside, super personal. Then, at the end of 2023, he takes this huge leap and just puts it out there. And people connect with it, big time. So much so that by March 2025, a record label signs him, and boom, just like that, the dream is real. And you've got to get this part. For him, music wasn't a job. It was him. Every single note was a piece of who he was. Every lyric was like a page from his diary. This is so important for understanding why he gets so protective of it all later on. But, once the dream gets real, the pressure gets real too. And this is where we start to see the sacrifices, the real cost of chasing perfection. It started small. The huge, vibrant world he used to live in just started to shrink. It got smaller and smaller until it was just him, his guitar, and the four walls of his studio. He was building his future, sure, but brick by brick, he was also walling himself in. 16 hours a day. I mean, let that sink in. That's not just dedication, is it? That's obsession. An amount of time that leaves basically no room for sleeping or eating, and definitely no room for other people. It's just a relentless grind. And, well, this is what happens when you're working 16-hour days. A text gets missed here, a phone call gets cut short there. All those little threads that keep friendships together start to snap, one by one. He was slowly fading out of his own life. But here's the thing. It wasn't malicious. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. Everything he did was driven by this deep, gnawing fear. A fear that if he took his foot off the gas for even a second, this fragile dream he'd finally grabbed would just shatter. But you can't keep the outside world out forever, right? And one day in September, that carefully constructed wall he'd built around himself, well, it didn't just get breached, it got smashed to pieces. So just picture it. He's deep in that 16-hour creative zone, totally locked in, and then, out of nowhere, the very people he's been avoiding are suddenly right there, on his doorstep. And this part is huge. They didn't just knock. They used a key he'd given them back when things were different, a symbol of trust. And they walk right into his sanctuary, his creative space, bringing all this loud party energy with them and just shattering his focus. And that was the moment everything broke. All the pressure, the exhaustion, the fear, all those weeks of isolation, it just boiled over in one single explosive second. The dam just burst. And what happens next is just total chaos. It wasn't just an argument, it was a complete meltdown. Yelling, fighting, things being thrown. And get this, the case of beer smashes his guitar pedals, the very tools he was using to build his dream. So symbolic, right? Then the door slams. And just like that, it's over. And all that's left is this new, heavy kind of silence. You'd think that explosion in the studio was the low point, but it wasn't the end of the story. The real consequences, the ones that cut way deeper, came a little later and in a much, much quieter place. So Christmas rolls around and he goes home, probably just hoping, for some comfort, hoping things could feel normal again. For a minute, seeing all the familiar faces, it must have felt like maybe he could just step back in time. But then he has this conversation with his mother, and her voice wasn't angry. It was quiet, but her words were absolutely devastating. This wasn't some heated accusation. It was just a calm, heartbreaking judgment. In her eyes, he hadn't just been busy. He had made a choice, and he'd chosen wrong. And in that moment, he's just caught. He's standing there totally stunned because one part of him is screaming, but they invaded my space. It was my work. But the other part knows she's right. The weight of what she said just crushes him. So where does that leave him? And where does that leave us? There are no easy answers here. There's no clear villain, no obvious hero, Just this really painful, complicated question that hangs in the air. And this is really the heart of the problem, isn't it? On the one hand, you could say he was just defending his workspace, setting a boundary when people barged in. But on the other hand, that boundary cost him the most important people in his life. This is the painful truth of it all. That beautiful, pure thing he wanted to create, his music, it got all tangled up with something really ugly: loss. The dream wasn't just about what he was gaining anymore, it was about who he was losing. That silence that fell after the fight in the studio, that wasn't peace. And this new silence, after his mother's words, is even heavier. It's the sound of broken trust, of burned bridges. It's the price he's paying, and he's only just now starting to realize how high it really is. Which brings us right here to this final, lingering question. And it's not really about who was right or wrong anymore, is it? It's about our own dreams. When does protecting our ambition cross the line into pushing away the people who matter most? Was an apology deserved here? And if you think so, who should be the one to give it?